Some reflections on marriage in answer to objections by a married man is the third section in Stages on Life's Way by Søren Kierkegaard. As we discussed in the last section, the banquet ended and all headed for home in the morning. As the carriages were being readied, the group went for a walk in the early morning hours and came upon a walled garden. Looking in, they saw two figures, a married couple, and listened into their conversation. This was the end point of all the philosophizing in vino that had gone on earlier that morning. After all this said, all of the speeches, all of the reasoning, the group looked upon the married couple in silence. And watching the two, a silent thought prevailed itself upon the group. No matter how comic, irrational, or ludicrous it may be, it seems that love often does work. After a moment, Victor recognizes the man as Judge William, the man whose private papers he had published as the second part of Either Or, and his young wife. After the couple had left the arbor, the group started to leave when they noticed that Victor had crept up to the veranda of the house and had stolen another of the judge's manuscripts. He says, "If I have published the others, it is no more than my duty to publish this also." As Victor goes to put the manuscript in his pocket, it is stealthily lifted from his possession by William F.M., the shadowy teller of this tale and silent sixth member of the group at the banquet. He then publishes it as Some Reflections on Marriage in Answers to Objections. This section is by Judge William, entitled Some Reflections on Marriage in Answer to Objections, and this is on marriage, which is tied to the ethical, which requires the repetition of commitment to the ethical. The judge praises marriage as if it is the highest state of human affairs, and he says, "Therefore, praised be marriage, praised be everyone who speaks in its honor." The objections he is addressing are apparently from the young man, the author editor of Either Or Part 1. The judge says, "In paganism there was a god for erotic love and none for marriage. In Christianity there is, if I may say so, a god for marriage and none for erotic love. Marriage is, namely, a higher expression for erotic love. Marriage I regard then as the telos, goal of individual life. It is the highest telos in such a way that anyone who evades it crosses out the whole of earthly life in one single stroke and retains only eternity and spiritual interests. A person's total ideality lies first and last in resolution. Any other ideality is a trifle. The state does not need to penalize bachelors. Life itself punishes the person who deserves to be punished. To be a married man is the most beautiful and meaningful task. The person who did not become married is an unfortunate whose life did not permit him that, or who never fell in love, or he is a suspicious character whom we eventually ought to take into custody. Marriage is the fullness of time. He who did not become a married man is always regarded as unhappy by others, or he is that also to himself. All falling in love is a wonder. The young man then dissolves love into loving the lovable. After all, he must choose. Poor fellow, that is an impossibility. In paganism, therefore, love was attributed to Eros. Since the resolution of marriage adds the ethical, that somewhat arc designation to a deity, thereby becomes in marriage a purely religious expression for one's receiving the beloved from the hand of God. The judge sees marriage as the necessary and sole fulfillment of erotic love, and hence bachelorhood is an aberrant choice, a choice Kierkegaard himself made. However, it is clear that the judge praises marriage to an inordinate degree and makes a quasi-religion of it. Earlier he spoke of the ethical state of marriage being caught in the religious, but here he seems to identify the two. Part of his reasoning is based on the paradigm of Adam and Eve. If the first, that is, ideal couple, were pronounced husband and wife by God himself, then marriage must be the highest union for mortals, and is in fact a religious union. Not surprisingly, in the same manner, the judge also extols the virtues of motherhood. One must not, however, disregard all that the judge says, simply because he takes this untenable position. When he talks of resolution and commitment, he is close to Kierkegaard's own view. For Kierkegaard held that men of his day were more reflective than passionate. However, the nature of the ethical state is that of commitment, and it is the judge's identification of the ethical, or more accurately, one part of the ethical, namely marriage, with the religious, which must be considered erroneous. He says the resolution is a religious view of life constructed upon ethical presuppositions, a view of life that is supposed to pave the way, so to speak, for falling in love and to secure it against an external and internal danger. Toward the end of this discourse, Judge William seems to catch himself and concede that the ethical, exemplified by marriage, is not to be confused with the religious. He says, yet, from the essentially religious point of view, it cannot be denied that it makes no difference whether or not a person has been married. Here, the religious opens the infinite abyss of the abstraction. The religious abstraction desires to belong to God alone. For this love it is willing to refuse, renounce, sacrifice everything. From this love, it will not allow itself to be disturbed, diverted, captured by anything else. However, he returns soon to an intolerable confounding of the ethical and the religious. He says, if it is doubtful whether falling in love is from God, if falling in love does not even need to presuppose a religious view, marriage is unconditionally of religious origin. Thus, the person who breaks it not only makes himself and those whom he loves totally miserable, but he places life in contradiction with itself. He places God in contradiction with himself. He also says, there are innumerable bonds by which I am bound fast in life, as a tree is bound by the multiple branching roots. No snake, no 10 snakes, would be able to wind themselves as alarmingly and tightly around a person's body and squeeze as just the marriage that ties me down in hundreds of ways and consequently would fetter me with 100 chains. He is against system builders in the realm of marriage, just as he is against them in the realm of the religious. He says, ordinarily, we speak only of a married man's unfaithfulness, but what is just as bad is a married man's lack of faith. Faith is all that is required, and faith compensates for everything. Just let understanding and sagacity and sophistication reckon, figure out, and describe how a married man ought to be. There is only one attribute that makes him lovable, and that is faith, absolute faith in marriage. Just let experience in life try to define exactly what is required of a married man's faithfulness. There is only one faithfulness, one honesty that is truly lovable and hides everything in itself, and that is the honesty toward God and his wife and his married estate, and refusing to deny the miracle. The judge has taken a defensible view that marriage is from God and has extracted the conclusion that marriage is so much a part of the universal, that is, the ethical, that God, the absolute, will look upon a bachelor with indignation and disapproval, that his plan will be frustrated. In the next video, we're going to talk about the next section in the book called Guilty/Not Guilty.